Hi there everyone, my name is Zach and welcome to my channel. Amongst other things, I'm a reenactor and a jouster, and today I'm going to be answering a question from one of my patrons over on Patreon. If you're interested at all in Patreon, you can find the link down in the description below. At the time of recording, I currently have 2 patrons, which is 2 more than I ever thought that I would actually get. I really kind of have no clue about it. So thank you to you guys for supporting me and supporting the channel, and thank you for your great questions. This week's question is about how to deal with heat when you are in full plate armour. As I'm making videos, I share stuff about it over on the Patreon. When I was creating the Tewkesbury video, this was a question that came up as part of that discussion. I felt that it needed its own video rather than being a small part of that big video. So here we go. Right, so how to deal with heat in armour. First of all, and very importantly, you should plan your battle for Northern Europe in the late 15th century or the 16th century. Now, this is because climate change has happened a lot over the centuries. And in fact, during the late 15th century into the 16th century, there was a period which some people call the Little Ice Age, where basically the average global temperature went down by quite a bit. So what that means is that what I tend to reenact and the clothing that I tend to wear is actually not really appropriate for the climate that I currently live in, because the climate has changed over the intervening 500 years or so. So the people that were fighting these battles originally in full plate armour tended not to have the same kind of temperatures that we sometimes have to put up with in modern England. But there were some other things that you could do. For example, you need to practice being hot and being in armour. Conditioning is really, really important. If you're used to something, then it makes it a lot easier. What you always get as an English person when you start complaining about the heat is there's always a Texan or a Californian or a Australian who comes out of the internet and tells you that, oh, that's every Tuesday for them. And that's completely, that's true. Scientifically, I can't argue with that, but it's what you're used to that's important. If all of your training sessions have been done in that kind of heat, then you're going to cope a lot better when it comes to battle. Or maybe not all training sessions, but if you've done some training in that sort of heat, then you'll cope a lot better. Whereas over here in the UK, when we hit the really high temperatures that we had at Tewkesbury, around about 30 degrees, none of us have actually trained in that kind of heat before, either very much or at all, and so we're not used to it. There's some really great examples of this from the period, and that would be tournaments. Tournaments were not just about, practicing your targeting. That's something that you can do against a target, a quintain or something like that. But a really good thing about tournaments is that it allows you to practice being in armour. It practices pretty much all of the parts of fighting, including the standing around waiting and spending lots of time in armour. There's actually a famous tournament from Armour in France, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, where 3 knights had pavilions put up in a field, and they took on all comers for 30 days. So anyone could come and challenge them. They would come forwards to outside the pavilion, they would knock on the shield, and then that knight would have to come out and face them. And the chronicler makes it important, and they state that the knight was ready and in their armour, and they sallied forth from their tent. So it's not just the fighting that's important there. These guys are spending 30 days in a tent in armour, and that is going to help them when it comes to actually being out in armour in the field in the heat. Even if the heat isn't quite as much as you would expect, if you're used to having the heat increase of wearing armour, then it's not quite so much when you have the heat increase of wearing armour and the heat increase of a particularly hot day. Okay, number 3, don't wear too much padding. One of the things that you see a lot on a reenactment battlefield is people wearing too much padding all over. This is partly to do with trying to make the armour fit, in which case, you know, if your armour doesn't fit you quite as well, you can just add some padding to some areas, or just padding over the whole thing, and then you can squish some padding in to make it fit. Another reason that we like padding is that our swords and weapons are not sharp, and so the padding helps against the blunt forces of the heavier weapons that we use. There's no chance of us getting cut, but there is a higher chance of bruising and broken bones when the swords are that much heavier and basically bars of metal. Okay, so we like a lot of padding, but historically there wasn't really much padding being worn during the age of plate armour. Now, there's several reasons why we can believe this. First of all of the documents that we have, that I have seen, that talk about what you should wear underneath armour, describe a doublet. Now, a doublet comes from the term lining, so it's or doubled. So the idea is that it's thick. It's maybe 2 or 3 layers of fabric. These doublets are generally not padded. One of the reasons why we say that is because there's a tournament book written by René of Anjou who explains that his doublet for the club melee, which is a special type of tournament, should be padded across the shoulders. Now, the reason why this is important is because in his document, whenever the equipment that he is describing is the normal equipment used for war, he just says you should use the equipment as it should be used for war. So for the leg armour, for example, he says just wear leg armour as you would for war. So the description of a doublet that is padded across the shoulders suggests that that is non-standard. He also talks about a type of tournament that happens in the Germanies where people wear a lot more padding than he is suggesting. So it did happen, but he doesn't like it, and he says that it looks really unfashionable. And you've got to remember that fashion was a really big part of armour as well. So people probably would be less likely to wear stuff that made them look unfashionable. So don't wear too much padding, and if you do need padding for something specific like a club melee, then wear it, have it added just in the sections that need it, like over the shoulders during the club melee. Okay, next one, don't wear too much armour. Again, let's go back to René of Anjou. Obviously this is a tournament, but if you have a look at this cuirass that he's designed for the club melee, you can see that actually he's taken out a whole load of metal to make it a lot easier to wear. Now obviously you wouldn't do this in battle because arrows could very easily find those holes. What you could do for sure is take your bever off. We see this a lot in art, and people wearing sallets without bevers. Often people will say that this is artistic license, that they're trying to that the artist is trying to show something, but I don't believe this is the case. For a start, it's not consistent. Okay, you might say, oh, all the people that are showing their faces are main characters. So just like in Hollywood movies, they show the face. Well, that's not true. People of all different importance are in these paintings without their bevers. You might also say that it is something that they do so that you can see the person's face and you can tell who they are. Now, for a certain type of art, that is true. So for effigies, you would definitely show the face to show who that person is. However, for things like miniatures, that wouldn't be the case. For a start, people didn't know what important or famous people's faces looked like because there was no photography. Secondly, the way they actually developed a way of showing who someone is without actually needing to show their face. So heraldry was really important for that. That was partially because no one or very few people were actually able to see each other's faces. You know, you might be a lord and you might not have actually met your king for years and years. You know, he might have changed an awful lot, but you always knew who he was, not by his face, but by the heraldry that he wore in battle. So taking off the bever is a really, really good way of cutting down on the heat. Another thing that you can do is remove other parts of your armour, for example pauldrons, and just fight in mail sleeves or something. Removing your gauntlets is also something that you see in historical art, although it seems like something that we wouldn't want to do in our modern minds. Now, one of the reasons why you might want to do these things in the medieval period where you wouldn't want to do it as a reenactor is because anyone who is rich enough to have a full harness of armour is also very likely to have a valet following them around. So if you're standing at the back of the battlefield watching your troops go in or waiting for the order to attack, then you can stand there with your bever off, your visor up, your gauntlets off, maybe having a little snack or something to drink. And then when the order starts coming in to mobilise, then you start putting your gauntlets on and you have your man put your bever on just as you're about to go into battle and as the arrows start falling. Another thing that you can do is that you can dress like an Italian. Now, in the north of Europe, this wasn't happening in the 15th century. We see a lot of reenactors like to dress like Italians and choose Italian styles. Yes, we did tend to import Italian armour, but we didn't tend to wear Italian fashion as far as we can tell. However, if you are representing an Italian, or if you are Italian, hi guys, I met some of you at Tewkesbury. Absolutely loved your kit, by the way. It was great to see you turn up at the commanders meeting with your drum and everything. It was awesome. Anyway, back to what I'm talking about. Italians, obviously, the climate was a lot hotter in Italy than it is in Northern Europe. And so the fashions tended to be slightly cooler. And you can see from this example here that they were wearing split hose. So the legs of the trousers were separate to each other, which left the linen undergarments showing in the middle. And you can see from these paintings as well that if you were to look up under an Italian man's armour, even if they're rich enough to have full plate, they very often, it seems, or I can't say very often, but they sometimes would be wearing split hose, possibly to help them stay cool. Now, what about modern? If you're planning on getting an armour made, then what should you do in order to stay cool? Because obviously you can't go back 500 years and have a fight in the Little Ice Age. Firstly, drink lots of liquid. Water is great. Historically, they did drink water. Maybe that's a video that I need to do in the future, because a lot of people seem to think that they didn't drink water. So firstly, drink lots of water. We've got safe water nowadays, but also use isotonic drinks to help yourself stay hydrated. Secondly, armour up and down slowly. One of the big problems that you can have is putting on your armour too late. If you're really, really hot, then getting really hot really quickly can cause a bigger problem. So you've got to acclimatise to the armour. It also just makes it all work that much better if you know that everything is fitting correctly, all of the points and the buckles are done up correctly. that is really important when you're armouring. Pick the right snacks. So at Tewkesbury, I went to the shop to get some drinks and snacks. I saw some really nice looking peanuts that I thought, oh yeah, those would be good. You know, I think they were jalapeno and cheese flavour. Now I realised my mistake before I took them onto the battlefield. But yeah, you've got to be careful about that sort of thing. Pick some high protein snacks that are going to keep you operating through the fight. This is something that they did historically as well. During a tournament, it was said that a man should have a table with wine, with meat, and with grapes or other fruit available to him. Finally, a wet towel on the face and or the hands is really, really good. And if you have to take your bever off, you know, retreat, take your bever, take your gauntlets off, use that to cool yourself down, and then put them all back on to go into the fighting, then do it. That feels so, so good. And thank you to all of the water carriers at Tewkesbury. You have no idea how good that feels until you've been that hot and you needed it that much. Thank you guys, and definitely if you're planning on reenacting in the heat, then making sure that you have some cool towels or flannels at the side will really help your fighters to keep going. The final one that I'd say is look out for each other. Whenever you're reenacting, whether you're doing a battle reenactment or a joust or anything like that, very often the people who are least able to judge whether or not they are capable of carrying on is the person themselves. So look after each other, look out for each other, make sure you've got people there who you trust, who can tell you, no, you need to sit this one out, or to make you take on water or have a rest. Thank you so much for joining me today, guys. Hopefully this was interesting to you. Please do like, share, subscribe, all of that sort of thing. If you want to join me over there on Patreon, then please do. There is nothing that I'm putting on Patreon that won't eventually end up on the channel, but I really, really appreciate the support that I have over there from my patrons. So thank you to you guys and anyone else who decides to join us. Thank you guys, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.